This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And our subject today is accountable or victim. And interestingly enough, as Candace has said many times, we don't discuss the topic ahead of time, although the topic does sort of flow from podcast to podcast. But this one is very important today because I could have been a victim, but I decided to be accountable. So I'm really interested in how we're going to work through this today, Candace. So give me a heads up.
So you know how when we think of the word accountable, and we've touched on this in some of the prior podcasts, and this is all based on the work by Brian Moran and Michael Lettington in their book, Uncommon Accountability. And if people are interested, they can go to uncommonaccountability.com and find out some more information. But the idea is that accountable tends to have a negative tone to it. And it's because up to this point, we tend to think of it as consequences for when we drop the ball. Either we do it personally or somebody else does it. And when somebody else does it, we tend to blame them. And when we do it, we tend to either blame ourselves, take self-blame, or we become defensive. But they point out a new way of looking at it, and basically to move from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset and make it a learning opportunity and find ways to open it up from there. So that's what we're going to talk about. So are we being accountable, or are we being a victim, and how we toggle from one to the other?
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So the idea behind paying attention to this, like, why do we want to learn these wonky little distinctions and so on? I mean, it's the kind of stuff that like turns me on. But for the audience, the new ways of thinking about accountable can help us really tap into our full potential, because we can be leaving a lot on the table in terms of our personal growth and sense of fulfillment when we are going up to the line of, technically being our word in terms of whether we accomplish something, versus maybe going above and beyond because there's risk there, and that may come back, may blow back on us. So any instances that you can think of where that may have happened to you, where you've wanted to persevere beyond a certain point, and then at that point somebody's pushed back on you that you didn't do it well enough or something?
Well, we were talking about this right before we came online. This has been an exciting yet a tough week for me. There's a lot of changes going on in our family, all good, okay, but under a pressure cooker of time. And one of the things that I determined I had to do was get the word out there for my accountability, and meaning, shows that I had planned for either this week, next week, or in the next couple weeks. Some of them I've had to go in and reschedule. And I've been very open and honest about it. I'm not blaming it on the situation. I'm just saying that this is the way it is, and this is going to be best for all of us. And everyone has been extremely supportive. It's like, oh, okay, so if we're not going to record today, here are some other dates I'm available, and we've worked it out. But there was one gentleman who just, didn't want to see it that way, and was trying to blame me for, making the changes. And, you can blame me because, yeah, I am making the changes. But in the past, his words would have really, cut through the core, and I would have felt badly, but yet I would have been angry with that person. I probably would have buckled under to their pressure, and it wouldn't have been a good thing. And so one of the things I'm learning is, be honest, be open, be transparent. And if other people don't work with you on that, then maybe it's not the relationship you should be in.
Yeah, so whether you would blame yourself or feel that you couldn't ask for something you needed, either way, you paid a price.
Right, right,
And by just being upfront about it, you're owning it, which is a form of accountability.
right.
And the upset could be on his, it would be his choice, but you're able to proceed without that baggage.
Exactly.
So kudos.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you.
And,
So-
I'm sure I've done this in the past, but I want your listeners to know that it's not as difficult as I've made it seem in the past. Whereas I always wanted to do the right thing for everybody else, even if it wasn't right for me. But I've learned through the last couple of years doing this podcast that it puts me in a very bad situation, and I'm not good at what I'm doing when I do that. So, we have to take care of ourselves in order to be supportive to other people.
Yeah, it can't be one-sided, and it's okay to ask for your needs to be met.
Right.
And you're not being capricious in any way about it, or cruel, certainly not. So I think this illustrates the missed opportunity that might have occurred if you had compromised what you needed for the sake of somebody else, and that you could be forthright with it, and then be able to recognize that you owned that part of the conversation. You were being responsible in that way.
Right.
And so, that's a great example in terms of how accountability can occur. Not the way we normally do it, which is do it this way, and if you don't do it this way, then somehow you're wrong, or you've dropped the ball in some way.
Exactly.
And the authors talk about healthy accountability, and it's the healthy accountability from their perspective is focusing on what we can control. All right, so
Okay.
sometimes that can be proactive, that going into something we're committing to, or sometimes people are committing us to, and being really clear in your own mind and their mind to the extent possible about what you can control. Sometimes it's a post-mortem, the event has occurred, and rather than blaming ourselves, we can look back and say, okay, what in this sequence of events that got me to whatever that point is, could I actually control? Because it's so easy to do the armchair quarterbacking after the fact.
Right.
And what can I learn from this scenario? So you just articulated a moment ago what you were learning from it. It reinforces that sense of, this is something I needed to do, and
Right.
I articulated it to him, and it was his choice, and so on. And then I didn't hear any victim in what you were talking about.
No. And usually I allow myself to be the victim. I make myself the victim, let me put it that way. But I'm learning that, there's no glory in being a victim. And it's just so much easier to know what is good for you, and in relationship to the situation, and then to be honest about it.
Well, and it carries the risk of carrying forward some resentment in the next interaction. So
Right.
it just has this polluting quality or potential to it. And when we're not a victim, the self-pity can be held at bay, and the idea that all of that other stuff, that's all emotionally self-destructive. That's a phrase they use in the book, which I really liked. And the phrase for me is, that occurred to me, and is that that victimhood, that blaming others and so on, creates a learning desert, because we don't even explore, how might this have been different? Not in terms of, did I do it good enough, or did I fail? But what can I learn from this scenario? So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, for many years, I didn't look at it as what can I learn from it. It was usually, um, oh, woe is me. I did it wrong. Um, or I allowed somebody else to direct me. Um, and then I would basically wallow in my pity. Um, but I don't know if it's considered aging or what when you all of a sudden wake up one day and you say, why am I beating myself up? I don't need any more scars. And that's how I look at things now. It's like, you know what? Let's figure out um, what the best scenario is at this time with the information that I have. And, that means sometimes you have to dig deep and, look at what has transpired in the past and how it's worked for you. And if it hasn't, that's a red flag that says you need to make some changes.
Yeah, and it may not be aging. I mean, aging is certainly going to be going on. It's unavoidable, but it might
Sure.
might be called wisdom,
I like that. I'm wiser now. Okay.
which is something, to pat yourself on the back for.
Yep.
So when we get to the healthy accountability, looking at this as a learning opportunity, we can pay attention. We're in this podcast, the Intentionality Gurus. We're talking about the hidden iceberg of things that drive a lot of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And so this is just a perfect example of it. And there's a coach, a well-known international coach named Michael Bungay Stanier. It has a long name, and he uses this whole idea of polarities. And so that's how I came up with the accountability versus victim. And the idea is to be, we're never 100% one or the other. We're somewhere on the scale, and it may shift, midstream, et cetera, but we can be looking at that hidden stuff that's going on inside of us and say, okay, where might I be a victim here? Where might I be blaming? What have I taken ownership for that maybe I shouldn't have been taking ownership for because it wasn't within my control? What can I take ownership for? And then, that phrase we always use here, which is that opens up or has the potential to open up two forks in the road
Right.
where we might have only seen one. And then what do we always say? That when you have a fork in the road, you have choice.
Right.
And when you have choice, that might lead to other forks and so on. So your entire vistas can open up. And then that gets us into a conversation about our full potential. Thoughts?
Well, yesterday during another podcast, um, I was talking to a sales coach, and one of the things that um, resonated and maybe helped me with my situation today was that we're we as people we are always selling something, whether it's allowing me to be in the same room with you to take part in a conversation. It's a form of selling. And what you have to do is you have to become more vulnerable to other people. And, that might mean, hanging out some dirty laundry for everybody to see. But if people don't know where you are at the moment, um, you're trying to be honest with them. There's a blockage, is what I'm trying to say. If they don't really know what you're going through, then they're not going to be able to understand what you're trying to say, and you're not going to be able to move forward. And so it's almost like you have to, open up your jacket and say, hey, I'm going to, tell you what's underneath my coat. And to me, that's been a great way of building my business, but building my confidence of, being accountable for what I need to do.
And as you said, vulnerable, because it comes at a risk of being open and less defended, self,
Right.
defending. But that opens up more opportunities to get maybe a mutual arrangement where each party gets what they want. Maybe not 100%, but at least there's some collaboration in that, not a I'm taking from them or I'm giving to them kind of scenario.
Right.
Well, the other thing that I like about the material in this book, and I can't say enough good things about it, is basically you can ask, where might I be a victim here? So you don't have to accept that. You don't have to try that jacket on and keep it. And then what might I learn here? So when things are going well, when do I acknowledge that as well? So to be able to pat ourselves on the back like you did today, acknowledge that, hey, that could have been a thorny situation. Maybe that person was trying to, give some of that back to you, blame you. And just to be able to say, I'm not taking that on. It's, I was straightforward, and so on. And then the other part is that simple, non-judgmental role we can play in looking at the events that occurred. And that's what I heard. You were just pretty, dispassionate about it, saying, nope, I did my part. He did his part. And this is how it played out. And so
Exactly.
to me, you were exhibiting healthy accountability and ownership in that situation.
And it takes a lot of practice. I hope our listeners understand that. If you've allowed yourself to play the victim in the past, it's so easy to fall into that role, but it's more like being in the moment and looking around you and asking yourself those difficult questions. Okay. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to say? And what, how far do you want to go with it? I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because sometimes, depending who that other person is or the situation, you may not be ready. And I saw that a couple of times, not in my case scenario, but with a couple of other people that I've been talking to, that they really had to struggle at the right communication, and both of them fell backwards and said, okay, I give in. And then when they were talking to me, it was like, I wish I hadn't done that. And it's like, but a lot depends where you are at the moment.
Yeah, it's all a learning curve. And,
Right.
At least endeavoring to learn more things. I don't think there's a downside to learning. It doesn't happen overnight.
You're right.
So the whole idea here is basically just to catch ourselves in the act of when we're being accountable and what kind of accountability we're being. They like to call it uncommon accountability, and that's part of the other elements in the book. But this piece of, where are we taking ownership? Where are we feeling like we're a victim, or somebody's attempting to label us as the underdoer, I guess is the phrase. And then where can we see learning opportunities so that we can up our game and flip that switch on that polarity between the accountability and the victimhood, and maybe start tapping more of our internal potential. So I encourage people to get the book, read it. I think they did a great job in this, showing this hidden iceberg of stuff below accountability, which is one of the things I love. And that's all I had to say on this podcast about that topic.
Okay. Well, I know that we are getting close to some sort of announcement here in the next month or so. And those of you who have been listening to us, Candace is going to be bringing something new to the podcast. And again, we encourage you to contact us. Let us know if you want to participate. And I always like new things, so I'm excited.
Me too. Can't
All
wait.
right. Talk to you soon. Have a
All right,
great
thank
day.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.